Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back in time, not to the glamorous courts of kings or the famous battlegrounds of legends, but to a perfectly ordinary morning in a 13th century European village. You, yes you, are the main character in this story. But before you start picturing yourself in noble robes or sipping wine in a turret, let's set the scene more accurately. It's cold, it's damp, and something smells like turnips. You're curled up on a bed of straw, which is both your mattress and your heating system. The room is pitch black, save for the dying embers of a hearth fire smoldering under a layer of ash. The air is thick, really thick, with smoke. Not because anyone's burning incense, but because chimneys haven't really caught on yet. Instead, the smoke just kind of hangs there. You inhale a lungful of it and immediately begin to reconsider your life choices. A goat is staring at you. She's not here for a cuddle. She just lives here, along with several chickens, 3 other humans, and a large beetle crawling slowly across the wall. Welcome to the great hall of a small manor, where privacy is an imaginary concept, and personal space extends about 2 inches in every direction. Your feet are freezing. The fire went out hours ago, and there's a fine layer of frost on the inside of the one glassless window, which is actually just a wooden shutter someone forgot to close properly. You shift, and the straw beneath you crackles. You try not to wake the person sleeping next to you, but that's tricky, because there are actually 2 people sleeping next to you, and neither of them bathed this month. Now don't panic. You're going to survive this. Maybe. But let's be honest. You probably won't last past morning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to post where you're listening from and your local time. I love seeing how far this little time-traveling campfire circle reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slowly sit up, brushing bits of straw and mystery fluff from your tunic. It's early, no clocks of course, but judging by the rooster that's already screaming, it's probably around 5 a.m. Outside, you hear the muffled sound of hooves clopping through the mud, and a dog barking at nothing in particular. The first thing you do is grab your hood, because your head is absolutely freezing. In the 13th century, you don't sleep with your head uncovered unless you're rich, foolish, or dead. You tuck it around your ears, shuffle off your pile of straw, and try not to step on the chicken sleeping near your foot. You fail. The chicken squawks. Everyone groans. A child sneezes. There's no time to linger. The day starts early, and there are no weekends, holidays, or snooze buttons. You pull on your shoes, more accurately, 2 leather flaps tied together with string, and wince as your feet sink into the cold, damp dirt floor. If you're lucky, today it won't rain. But it's England, so it probably will. As you shuffle toward the door, the family dog stirs from its heap of rags and gives you a look that says, "Good luck out there, genius." You open the wooden door, which creaks like it's auditioning for a haunted house, and step out into the foggy, gray-blue of early dawn. The smell hits you instantly. Wood smoke, livestock, and something else. Human. The village is a cluster of huts, mostly wattle and daub structures, with thatched roofs that are definitely leaking. Thin tendrils of smoke rise from the few fires that haven't gone out overnight. Somewhere, someone's already beating a rug against a fence post. You wonder briefly where they got a rug, but you've got bigger problems. You're hungry. You're freezing. Your back hurts from sleeping on straw and sharing space with two snoring adults and one goat with very sharp elbows. And now you have to survive a full medieval day without soap, caffeine, or Google Maps. Still, historians estimate the average medieval peasant walked 4 to 10 miles per day and worked 10 to 14 hours. So that's something to look forward to. There's no breakfast just yet, but your first task is to tend to the fire, which has, of course, gone out. You crouch beside the hearth, using a bit of flint and some dry grass to coax a few sparks into existence. It takes longer than you'd like. The smoke returns instantly, eye-watering and thick, coating everything in a fresh film of soot. You cough politely. Now that there's some light, you notice how dirty your tunic is, not in a worn once and needs a wash way. More like, this has seen 3 harvests and a funeral. Clothing is expensive, and most people own 2 outfits, one for daily use and one for dying in. You're wearing the former, unfortunately. Someone outside yells about a loose pig. This is normal. As you head to fetch water for the day, you pass the village well, which has a long line of equally grumpy neighbors waiting their turn. You nod. They nod back. One man has 3 teeth and is wearing a cloak made of rabbit skins. You feel a twinge of cloak envy, and then, just as you're feeling almost human, a boy sprints by barefoot, screaming, "The reeve is coming!" Everyone groans. The reeve, part tax collector, part crop inspector, part professional mood ruiner, means that your morning just got a whole lot worse. You hurry back to your home, dodging a suspiciously territorial goose, and sidestepping a pile of what you're hoping is compost. You slam the water bucket down by the door and take one last look at the horizon. The sun hasn't even fully risen yet, and already you're late, tired, and slightly peckish. You sigh. This is going to be a long, long day. But hey, you're alive. For now. Let's see how long that lasts. You bend over the cold water bucket, the one you wrestled from the well, at dawn, and take a long look at your reflection. Big mistake. The face, staring back, is puffy, sleep-deprived, and lightly dusted with ash from the morning fire-starting fiasco. Your hair is doing something medieval, possibly historic. Still, you're expected to make yourself presentable. You splash the shockingly cold water on your face, instantly regretting every decision that brought you to this point. There's no towel, so you wipe your face on your sleeve twice. Now your sleeve is wet. Your other sleeve has goose droppings on it. Excellent. Time for hygiene, 13th century style. You reach for the family tooth cleaning implement, a small dish containing a blackish mixture that smells like mint and regret. It's a homemade tooth powder. And yes, you're brushing with your finger, the gritty mix of crushed charcoal, dried herbs, and occasionally ground oyster shell, has the texture of sand and the taste of a questionable decision. You rub it across your teeth as best you can. There's no toothbrush and certainly no floss, but you might get a sprig of rosemary if you're feeling fancy. You think briefly about how your modern self once refused to use hotel toothpaste because it was the wrong brand. Oh, how far you've fallen. Historians still argue whether tooth hygiene was more ritual than genuinely effective. Sure, some medieval folks had surprisingly good teeth, largely due to lack of refined sugar. But let's not pretend this charcoal paste is whitening anything except your resolve to never smile. Next, your hair. You pull out your comb, carved from bone, and resembling something a Viking would have whittled during a midwinter depression. You run it through your hair and immediately snag on a tangle the size of a walnut. Ow, ow. You keep going. You're not entirely sure if that noise came from the comb or your scalp. You notice movement. A flea. 2 fleas. Honestly, you're impressed. It took this long. You give up on the comb and smooth your hair back under your linen coif. A sort of medieval bonnet that tells the world, I gave up, but fashionably. Now that you're reasonably scrubbed and groomed by the local definition, you move to your next task, cleaning out the chamber pot. Yes, the bathroom is a wooden bucket. It smells like a crime scene and must be emptied into the midden pit behind the house. You hold your breath, walk quickly, and try not to overthink the implications of medieval waste management. A curious side note, some people believed that strong-smelling herbs could counteract disease carried by bad air, or miasmas. So naturally, you're wearing a tiny cloth pouch filled with dried lavender and thyme around your neck, because nothing says wellness like perfume and wishful thinking. Your hands now smell like a confusing mix of lavender, compost, and burnt ash. So you wash them in the leftover water, now murky and a little judgmental. Soap? That's reserved for the wealthy or for extremely special occasions. You do your best. And now, finally, breakfast. You return indoors and sit on a bench where the family has gathered around a wooden board that serves as a table. There are no chairs, no forks, and no menu. Just a steaming pot of barley gruel, thickened with yesterday's scraps and vaguely flavored with something that might be leek, if you're lucky. You spoon the warm, mushy mixture into your mouth. It's bland, but warm. Someone passes a lump of hard cheese. You cut off a chunk, chip a molar, and nod in satisfaction. There's no coffee. There is never coffee. You might get ale, weak, flat, and served warm. But this early in the morning, it's usually just water or milk, depending on how generous the cow feels. You sip cautiously and try not to picture what the inside of the bucket looks like. Conversation is sparse. Most people are chewing, or just mentally preparing for the day ahead. One of the children begins humming a tune about Saint Cuthbert and the miracle of the turnip. It's not a hit. At some point, a neighbor stops by to borrow a coal for her hearth. You nod solemnly and poke at the fire until a small ember glows. She carries it away in a clay cup lined with moss, like a medieval Zippo. You overhear talk of someone in the village being fined for selling underweight bread. The assize of bread and ale, one of the earliest consumer protection laws, is very serious business. If your loaf is too small or your ale too weak, you can be pilloried. You briefly reconsider your dream of one day becoming a baker. As the fire dies down and bowls are licked clean, people begin to shuffle about, layering on clothes in preparation for the day's work. You do the same, dragging on a thick woolen tunic over your linen shift. It smells like sheep and feels like wearing a slightly aggressive doormat. Over that, a belt to hold your tools. Over that, a cloak, patched, stained, and barely water resistant. Shoes are subjective. They're made of leather, shaped like a pointed sock, and offer roughly the same support as wrapping your foot in a tortilla. You stuff straw inside to pad the soles. It's not perfect, but neither are your arches anymore. You check the weather. It's still gray. It's always gray. There's a light mist clinging to the thatched rooftops, and someone nearby is already yelling at a pig. Time to go. You head to the door, grabbing a small cloth bag containing your lunch. A chunk of rye bread, an onion, and a piece of smoked fish that smells like it knows secrets. Stepping outside, you immediately squelch into a puddle. The road is mud. The sky is leaking. And you're officially on your way to work. Your fingers are already numb, and it's not even mid-morning yet. You trudge down the muddy track that passes for a road, already feeling the damp seeping through your shoes. The village is beginning to stir, and you spot a few familiar faces. The shepherd's boy, herding an unreasonable number of sheep, with an even more unreasonable number of whistles. The alewife's daughter, chasing a runaway goose. And the miller, grumbling about some unknown injustice involving oats. You nod at each of them in turn, because in the 13th century, not acknowledging your neighbors is both rude and suspicious. Gossip is the social currency of the time, and you really don't want anyone spreading rumors that you're secretly Flemish, or worse, a Norman sympathizer. Your destination this morning is the Lord's Domain, the land held directly by the manor's noble overlord. It's your obligation, part of the feudal system's grand bargain, in exchange for a modest strip of land to farm for your own food. You owe several days of labor each week to the Lord. It's called week work. And yes, it is as thrilling as it sounds. Today, you're assigned to the fields. Specifically, mucking out the drainage ditches along the edge of the barley plots. Glamorous? No. Necessary? Apparently. As you arrive, you join a small, sullen crowd of villagers already hard at work. Most are wielding basic tools, wooden spades with iron tips, long-handled hoes, and rakes that look more like medieval torture devices. Someone's brought a wheelbarrow with only one wheel and a personality disorder. You pick up a spade and begin digging. The soil is heavy with rain, thick like wet bread dough, and every lift of the shovel feels like you're challenging gravity to a duel. You will definitely lose. As you work, your mind drifts. You remember yesterday's tale about a nearby village where a man swears he saw a saint appear in a bowl of porridge. You wonder if you should try looking for saints in your own breakfast. Maybe Saint Soggy of barley. A toad hops past your boot and pauses, blinking slowly. You blink back. Neither of you wants to be here. The Reeve appears shortly after, walking down the row with the enthusiasm of a man who deeply enjoys rules. He carries a tally stick, used to mark your attendance and productivity. If you slack off, your family might owe extra labor. Or worse, get a stern talking to during Sunday Mass, which is the medieval version of public shaming, with bonus and sense. As you dig, you overhear a conversation between two older women, debating the exact cause of their neighbor's rash. One blames bad humors, the other suspects a cursed bread oven. Historians still argue whether medieval medical beliefs helped or hindered daily life. But one thing's certain. The logic is creative. The work is repetitive, dirty, and punctuated by frequent breaks to swat at flies or untangle your tunic from a thistle bush. Around midday, you're allowed a brief rest. You sit on a fallen log, unwrap your lunch bundle, and attempt to bite into your piece of rye bread. It's dense, possibly sentient. You gnaw off a corner, chew for about a week, and wash it down with water that tastes faintly of iron and regret. Lunch also includes an onion, which you bite like an apple. It burns. It also clears your sinuses, maybe permanently. The smoked fish is salty and chewy, and you silently thank whatever ancestor figured out that hanging food in smoke makes it last longer. You don't think about how long it's lasted. Someone nearby offers you a piece of their apple, and you accept gratefully. Fruit is a seasonal luxury, and this one still has a worm in it. You eat around the worm and feel oddly victorious. After lunch, it's back to digging. Your back is sore, your hands are blistered, and your boots are now basically decorative. But somehow, time keeps moving. A nearby boy stirs up some excitement by discovering a fragment of old pottery in the dirt. It's probably just an old bowl, but a few of the older villagers whisper that it could be Roman or cursed or both. You make a mental note not to touch it. A woman passes by with a bundle of herbs tied to her belt. She's the local healer or wise woman, and she pauses to ask if your elbow pain is still troubling you. You nod. She offers a small jar of goose fat mixed with crushed yarrow, instructing you to rub it on before bed. You thank her and do not ask about side effects. You suspect the answer would involve frogs. The sun, such as it is, finally begins to sink low in the sky, bathing the wet fields in a golden light that makes the mud look almost poetic. You glance toward the horizon and see a small figure leading a cart pulled by a single lopsided donkey. Is the baker's apprentice, delivering stale loaves to those too tired to bake. You consider bartering your smoked fish bones for one, but decide against it. Your dignity has already taken enough hits today. By the time the overseer calls the end of the workday, your tunic is soaked, your hands are raw, and your soul has considered reincarnation. You scrape your boots against a rock, flick a beetle off your sleeve, and begin the long, squishy walk back to the village. As you pass the hedgerows lining the path, you notice someone has tied a strip of red cloth to one of the branches. It's a charm meant to ward off the evil eye. You nod, respecting the effort, and resist the urge to hang your entire wardrobe from the tree for added protection. Finally, you arrive home. The chickens have returned to their coop. The goat is chewing something that might have once been a hat, and smoke curls from the hearth once more. You duck inside, grateful for warmth. However smoky and crowded, dinner will be simple again. Maybe lentil stew if the larder gods are kind. You're too tired to care. You settle onto the bench, stretch out your legs, and try to ignore the cold knot forming in your lower back. Tomorrow, you'll probably be sent to help repair a fence or collect firewood from the edge of the forest, and you'll do it. Because in the 13th century, rest is a myth, and survival is the full-time job. Still, you made it through day one. That's worth something, right? Even if you probably won't survive past morning. Again, you wake up to the sound of distant bells, soft and irregular, clanging in the chill morning air, like a half-hearted church service for sleepy cows. It's not quite dawn, but the sky is already losing its stars. Your body aches in places you didn't even know had muscle groups. Your arms feel like overcooked porridge. Your feet are one long, continuous bruise. And your lower back appears to have gone on strike. Still, the day waits for no one, especially not a peasant. You sit up on your straw-stuffed mattress, which has developed a strange dip in the middle, as if it's trying to hug you back into bed. Tempting. But outside, someone is already shouting about firewood. And you remember today's joyful task, gathering kindling from the forest's edge. You pull on your damp tunic, which has not dried so much as achieved a new state of matter, and lace up your shoes with a sigh that might be mistaken for a medieval prayer. Out the door you go, into the cold. The path to the forest is well worn, but far from pleasant. It meanders past the fields, dips through a shallow ravine, and then skirts a few suspiciously large puddles that might actually be small lakes. As you walk, your breath steams in the air. Somewhere nearby, a rooster makes a noise like a trumpet being strangled. You pass an old man who greets you with a toothless grin and the cheerful news that a fox got into the chicken coop last night. Again, he chuckles as though this is funny. You nod politely, despite not finding poultry-based tragedies particularly humorous before breakfast. The forest looms ahead, dark and thick, and a little too storybook for comfort. You half expect to see a witch's hut or a squirrel with a crossbow, but mostly you're on the lookout for wood. And not just any wood. It has to be dry, burnable, and legally collectible. See, in the 13th century, forests are complicated. Much of the wooded land is under forest law, meaning it technically belongs to the king or the local lord. You're not allowed to chop down trees, hunt deer, or even gather too many fallen branches without risking a fine, or worse, a lovely vacation in the stocks. Historians still argue whether forest law was strictly enforced or mostly a way to keep peasants in line. Either way, you're not about to take chances. You stick to the outskirts, careful to avoid anything that looks too log-shaped. You carry a bundle sling over your shoulder, and as you gather sticks and small branches, you begin to notice just how good you've gotten at identifying wood by sound. Dry wood makes a satisfying snap, while damp wood just sulks quietly. You aim for the snappy stuff. Around you, the forest is alive with morning noises, rustling leaves, birds calling out territory rights, and the occasional ominous creak of an old tree reconsidering its life choices. You keep your eyes down and your ears open. Not just for animals. There are rumors of bandits and strange forest folk. Though frankly, anyone willingly living out here probably smells worse than you do. And that's saying something. At some point, you stop for a break. You sit on a mossy log and pull out the last crust of bread from your bag. It's hard enough to injure someone, but you gnaw at it slowly while staring into the woods. Your fingers are numb, your nose is running, and your legs feel like hollow reeds. You wonder if your ancestors had better survival instincts. Then you remember that you're probably descended from someone who once tried to cook soup in a helmet. A squirrel darts past your foot with the speed and confidence of someone late to a nut emergency. You take it as a sign to move on, back to work. You gather more wood until the bundle on your back grows heavy. The cord digs into your shoulder, and your fingers are raw from all the splinters. You do find a few bits of resinous pine, which burn longer and smell slightly less like wet dog than the alternatives. On your way back, you spot something curious. A large rock with a small carved cross on it. Locals call these boundary stones, and they're usually there to mark parish lines, land divisions, or possibly cursed areas. You make a mental note not to step too close, just in case it starts to drizzle as you near the village. Of course it does. You pull your cloak tighter and feel the cold seep straight through your wool layers. Medieval waterproofing mostly involves thick fabric and low expectations. You finally return home and deposit your haul by the hearth. Someone grunts in approval. You have no idea who. Your vision is a bit blurry from exhaustion. You sit by the fire and stretch your legs. Your socks are soaked. Your elbows ache. And there's something gritty in your teeth. Possibly ash. Possibly bark. Possibly regret. Still, you've gathered enough wood for tonight, and maybe even tomorrow. You allow yourself a moment of pride. Then the door creaks open, and someone announces that the pig has escaped again. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. Welcome to rural life in the 13th century, where your reward for doing something hard is getting to do something harder immediately afterward. But duty calls. You head outside again, feet squishing in your boots, and follow the muddy hoof prints down the lane. The pig, as it turns out, is smarter than you. It has made it to the village green and is rooting enthusiastically under the herb cart. The apothecary is shouting something about ruined comfrey. You approach slowly, hands out like you're trying to talk down a small, angry god. The pig eyes you with suspicion. It's a standoff. You inch closer, then make a sudden grab for the rope around its neck. You miss. The pig squeals and bolts down the road, and you take off after it, slipping, stumbling, and briefly losing a shoe in the process. Eventually, with the help of two laughing children and a strategically placed basket, you corner the beast and guide it home, where it sulks into its pen like a disgruntled baron. By the time you get back inside, it's dusk. Someone's already stirring a pot over the fire. It smells edible. Probably. You collapse onto the bench, your clothes damp, your limbs sore, and your hair full of sticks. It's only midweek, and you, dear time traveler, are doing great. Ish. You sleep like a rock. Not a particularly restful rock. More like one buried under an avalanche. When you wake, it's still dark, though the faint glow of embers in the hearth reminds you that someone has already beaten you to the day. Today, the task is fence repair, which sounds deceptively peaceful until you realize it involves hauling timber, hammering splintery stakes into frozen ground, and trying to convince several chickens, a goat, and a very smug-looking sheep to stop escaping in the meantime. The fence in question borders the village common, shared grazing land where your neighbor's animals freely roam, trample, and chew on everything in sight. It's more a suggestion than an actual barrier. The posts lean in various directions, like a group of drunken monks, and the woven wattle sections sag, as if questioning the point of their own existence. As you step outside, your boots crunch over frost. The air smells like chimney smoke and distant manure. You stretch your aching arms, wondering vaguely if medieval muscle soreness qualifies as a religious experience. If so, your entire upper body is currently achieving sainthood. You meet up with two other villagers, assigned to the same task. Hilda, who could probably carry a cow under one arm, and Dunstan, who once got kicked in the head by a mule and forgot how to pronounce the word turnip. Both are in better moods than you. Suspiciously so. You get to work quickly. First step: collecting new stakes to replace the rotten ones. You trudge to the woodpile near the manor storehouse, which smells gloriously of sap and bark, and load up a bundle of sharpened posts. Each one is roughly the weight of a full-grown badger, possibly two. You return to the fence line and begin digging holes with a long iron spike that looks and feels like an oversized knitting needle from hell. The soil is frozen in patches, which means each thrust of the tool sends vibrations all the way up your spine. It's strangely satisfying, like medieval ice fishing for disappointment. As you set the new posts and lash together branches for wattle work, you begin to appreciate just how much effort goes into simple medieval infrastructure. That picturesque little fence you always see in storybooks, built with back-breaking labor, a deep hatred of splinters, and the occasional strategic curse muttered under your breath. One of the old fence posts snaps in your hands, revealing a nest of beetles. Hilda inspects it and casually mentions that beetle paste is used by her aunt to treat boils. You file that away under things I never asked to know, and move on. The goat, meanwhile, has noticed the weakened section of fence and is eyeing it like a seasoned escape artist planning her next heist. You glare at her. She stares back, chewing something that might once have been your scarf. As you hammer a stake into place, the rhythm of your work begins to blend with the soft sounds of village life. Distant voices, a dog barking at nothing, the low rumble of cartwheels over stones. It's strangely soothing, repetitive, sleepy even, like the world itself is dozing in and out of chores. Dunstan suddenly asks whether fences are a symbol of social boundaries or just literal ones. You blink. That's unexpectedly philosophical for a man who once confused a cabbage with his uncle. You offer a vague, thoughtful, and he seems satisfied. The sun begins to peek through the trees, turning the frost on the grass into tiny glints of light. You take a moment to stretch your back and glance over your work so far. It's not exactly straight, but it stands. Mostly. You count that as a win. A passing friar stops to compliment your craftsmanship and gently hint that donations to the local monastery are accepted in wood form. You smile and nod and offer him a particularly gnarly branch that looks like it might contain a squirrel. He thanks you and moves on, humming a hymn slightly off key. Later, as you weave fresh wattle between the stakes, Hilda tells a story about a neighbor's chicken that laid 3 eggs in a single day and was briefly declared a miracle. The local priest, less amused, suggested it might be the work of the devil, and the chicken was asked to repent. Historians still debate whether such tales reflect literal belief or village humor. Either way, the chicken now lives under protective supervision and pecks only during daylight. You work until your fingers are raw and your knees feel like they've been personally cursed by a minor saint. At midday, someone brings a small loaf of barley bread and a turnip spread with pig fat. You eat gratefully, pretending it tastes like anything other than sadness on toast. A child stops by to deliver a note from the steward. Tomorrow, you're due to help with the sheep shearing. You stare at the child, who is chewing on the message, and thank him politely. He nods, pockets the paper, and runs off cackling. By mid-afternoon, the fence is patched, the goat is temporarily baffled, and your hands look like they've lost a duel with a bramble patch. You admire your handiwork for a moment. It's not elegant, but it will hold. Probably. For a week. Maybe. On your way back to your dwelling, you pass the village green again and pause to watch a group of children trying to play a game involving sticks, stones, and increasingly vague rules. They shriek with laughter. You smile, just for a second. At home, you drop your tools by the door, rub your eyes, and sit down near the fire. A pot of something warm is bubbling. It smells faintly of onions and determination. You accept a bowl, dip in your wooden spoon, and eat slowly while watching the flames flicker. The day's labor clings to you like soot. You feel it in every joint, every muscle, every sleepy blink. As the fire crackles and the sky darkens outside, you lean back against the wall. Tomorrow will be another long day. More sheep, more sweat, more surprises. But tonight at least, the fence is holding, the fire is warm, and your goat is safely locked up for now. The first thing you hear in the morning isn't the rooster, it's the sheep. A long, low, echoing baa that rolls into your home like a foghorn made of wool. It's shearing day. Your legs ache before you've even stood up. The fire has gone out, and your breath fogs in the air. Someone, probably old Marta, has already taken the good embers, leaving you to nurse the coals back to life with a bit of dry straw, and that stubborn hope known only to peasants and small birds. You pull on your stiff tunic, now infused with a faint barnyard aroma that can best be described as vintage lanolin. Outside, the sky is gray, the ground is soft, and the sheep are already being rounded up by a pair of barking dogs and a boy who appears to be losing the argument. Today's flock belongs to the Reeve, the village administrator and source of mild terror. He's the sort of man who owns 2 belts and still looks disapproving, no matter what you say. But he also pays in food, which is enough to make you pretend you know how to shear sheep properly. The shearing takes place in a low, thatched barn that smells like wet hay and wool socks. Inside, several villagers are already at work, crouched over wriggling sheep, like determined tailors wrestling fluffy coats. You take your place beside a pile of blades, thick, heavy, iron shears, with a hinge so stiff you could use it to snap bones. You test them on a strand of straw. They squeak like angry mice. Good enough. Your first sheep is large, suspicious, and named Gertie, according to the chalkboard tally by the door. Gertie eyes you with contempt as you approach. Now, you've never fought a cloud before, but this is probably what it feels like. Sheep shearing is a delicate art. Too fast, and you nick the skin. Too slow, and the sheep starts to sweat, and then slips from your grip like a greased sponge. The goal is one long, unbroken fleece. Like peeling a carpet off a potato without slicing it open. You straddle Gertie, mutter a quick apology to any local wool spirits, and begin. The blades make a rhythmic snick-snick as you trim her down inch by inch. Underneath, she's surprisingly pink and warm, like a ham someone left in the sun. Gertie grunts, kicks once, and then gives up, clearly realizing you're not going to do this well, but you're doing it earnestly, which counts for something. The barn echoes with the sounds of snipping, bleating, and the occasional curse when someone gets a hoof to the shin. A few villagers chat as they work. One tells the story of a sheep that once got drunk off fermented apples and refused to be sheared until it sobered up. Another jokes that the Reeve counts sheep the way monks count sins. Always too many, and never quite in your favor. You grin, wiping sweat from your brow with your sleeve. Outside, the sun has decided to make a rare appearance, sending a shaft of golden light through the barn's wooden slats. Dust motes dance in the beam, swirling like tiny wool ghosts. Midway through your third sheep, a puffy creature with a birthmark shaped like a question mark, you begin to notice the rhythm of the work, the tug of fleece, the whisper of blades, the soft thump of hooves against the straw. It becomes almost meditative, soothing, in its own chaotic way. Of course, then a sheep sneezes directly into your mouth and ruins the moment. You finish with a pile of fleece at your feet, a sore back, and a new appreciation for wool as a material and a lifestyle. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your teeth. You'll be coughing up fluff for a week. You help bundle the fleece into large sacks, which are loaded onto a cart bound for the manor's spinning shed. Some will be dyed, others spun plain, and a small portion might even end up in a bishop's fancy robe. You briefly imagine your wonky shearing job being paraded around in a cathedral and smile. Lunch is served on the grass outside. Pottage, thick with lentils, a crust of cheese, and something that might once have been a leek. You eat with one hand and shoo sheep away with the other. A friar passes by and offers you a blessing in exchange for a few tufts of fleece to patch his robe. You oblige because it's either charity or risk being cursed with chronic foot rot. As the afternoon wears on, the reeve does his rounds. He nods at your work, wordlessly of course, and makes a mark on a wax tablet. You don't know if that's a compliment or a note to dock your next barley ration. Either way, you nod back with the expression of someone trying not to sneeze again. You spend the last hour chasing down the final few sheep who have clearly heard what's happening and want no part of it. One darts between your legs and knocks you into a haystack. Another leaps a fence with the grace of a medieval ballerina. Eventually, all are shorn. The fleece is packed, and you're covered in enough lanolin to slide uphill. Your hands are blistered, your arms ache, and your knees make a popping sound when you bend. But it's done. As you walk home, the sun dips low, casting the village in a golden haze. You pass the church, where the bell is tolling for evening prayers, and a few children sitting on a fence playing Guess That Smell, a game with no real winners. You pass a neighbor who waves and says, "You look like you lost a fight with a pillow." You smile. At home, you sit by the fire and gently pull wool out of your sleeves, socks, and possibly your soul. Your cloak smells like sheep. Your hands feel like worn-out tools. But you've earned your bread today. You stare into the flames as someone brings you a bowl of broth. The warmth seeps into your fingers, your chest, your bones. The fire cracks softly, and outside, a breeze stirs the leaves. You lean back, eyes half closed, wondering if Gertie will remember you next season. Probably, and she will not forgive. You wake up with straw in your hair. Again, there's no memory of how it got there. Perhaps the ghost of Gertie the sheep exacted revenge in the night. But you brush it out, stretch, and peer out through the wooden shutters. Mist clings low over the village, like a damp wool blanket, and everything looks slightly too quiet. That's because today is market day. Now, before you get too excited, this isn't the bustling medieval fair of your imagination. There are no jesters flipping through the streets, no fire breathers juggling pies. This is Village Market Day, which mostly means bartering, yelling, and a strong chance of catching a cold. You're not just a browser today, you're a seller. You've been tasked with carrying a basket of smoked eels and dried leeks to trade on behalf of your household. Why smoked eels? Because in a world without refrigeration, everything that isn't salted, dried, or blessed by a bishop gets weird very fast. You hoist the basket onto your back, wrap a woolen scarf around your neck, and trudge toward the village green, where the market stalls are slowly being assembled from crates, planks, and, judging by one corner, part of someone's broken cart. Vendors arrive from nearby hamlets and farms, each hauling their own oddities: wheels of goat cheese, baskets of eggs, little bundles of herbs tied with twine, pots of honey guarded like royal treasures. A man from 3 valleys over is selling fermented fish paste, and no one is sure whether to thank him or call for an exorcist. Your neighbor Edith is already haggling with a flax merchant over the price of linen thread. She's winning, despite being 4 feet tall and wearing a hat that might also be housing a squirrel. You find your usual spot near the well, lay out your eels, and brace for commerce. Trade in the 13th century is a full-body experience. There's bartering, of course, but also measuring, weighing, smelling, and the occasional dramatic tasting ceremony that involves several exaggerated noises and a long stare into the distance. Your first customer is a shepherd with a suspiciously nervous goat. He eyes your leeks like he's planning a duel, then offers a slab of hard cheese in exchange. You hesitate. The cheese smells like ambition and old boots, but it's dense, travels well, and might be the closest thing to flavor you'll get this week. You accept. The day rolls on with a rhythm, all its own. Children dart between legs, chasing each other with sticks. A woman walks by selling tiny pastries, filled with something sweet. Possibly apple, possibly something less identifiable. You spend one of your traded eggs to try one. It tastes like joy. Behind you, 2 men are arguing over the price of a clay jug that has clearly already been dropped. One of them insists it's a ventilation feature. Historians still debate whether medieval people genuinely believed half of what they said at market, or just enjoyed the performance. As the sun climbs, the market gets livelier. A man with a lute sings a song about a baker who married a bear. Long story. While a group of nuns quietly purchase ink and sheep vellum from a wandering scribe. He smells of wine and broken promises, but his calligraphy is excellent. You manage to trade all your eels, though one is returned briefly when a child mistakes it for a toy snake and is traumatized for life. By noon, you've secured a surprisingly impressive haul: a pot of barley flour, a small wheel of cheese, a pouch of dried mint, and, most thrilling of all, a spool of red-dyed thread. Red, the color of wealth, sin, and holiday socks. You tuck the thread carefully into your satchel, feeling briefly like a noble. Then you step in something the cow left behind and return to reality. As the market winds down, a bell rings from the church tower. Not for prayer this time, but as a signal. The manor reeve is arriving, with his ledger and his tax collectors. This part of market day is less fun. The reeve, flanked by two rather large men who could double as doorposts, begins to collect the village dues. Some pay in coin, rare. Most offer goods, pledges of labor, or produce. You're not expected to pay today, thank the saints, but you still keep your head down. Eye contact with the reeve is known to cause spontaneous generosity. You overhear someone whispering about a hidden basket of plums tucked behind a hay cart being bartered privately to avoid tithe. Plums are luxury, fruit with opinions. You briefly consider the ethics of smuggling in the name of pie. After the reeve leaves, there's a collective exhale. Laughter returns. Slowly, someone starts singing a harvest song. Off-key, but heartfelt. A boy attempts to juggle 3 apples and drops 2 into a pig trough. The pig is delighted. You pack up your things, feeling the satisfying ache of a day well traded. On your walk back, the air shifts. Clouds roll in. The scent of rain brushing against your face. You quicken your pace, already tasting the damp wool that's sure to follow. Back home, the rest of your household admires the red thread. It will be saved for a special garment, maybe for the next festival, or to sew a charm pouch. You joke that it could be used to embroider your initials on a turnip. The others groan. Dinner tonight is a blend of barley, onion, and dreams. The wind picks up outside, rattling the wooden shutters. Somewhere, a dog howls. You're too tired to care. You settle by the fire, feet numb, eyelids heavy. The red thread glows faintly in the candlelight. An absurd, tiny luxury in a world of mud, toil, and second-hand eels. You close your eyes, thinking of markets, melodies, and medieval haggling. You drift off with the faint sound of distant sheep and the scent of roasted leeks still lingering in the air. Your bed creaks louder than your knees this morning, which is saying something, because after a long market day, you've begun to sound like a rusted drawbridge every time you sit down or stand up. But today isn't about trade, or shearing, or trying to sell aquatic snakes disguised as dinner. Today, you're in the fields, not the nice ones near the church with soft grass and birdsong. No. You've drawn the strip, known ominously as the South Ridge, which sounds like a haunted hiking trail and feels worse. It's long, sloped, and filled with rocks that appear to reproduce overnight. Like most villagers, you don't own land. You hold strips in the open fields by the grace of your Lord, worked in endless rotation with your neighbors. It's called the tree-field system, a clever strategy that lets crops rotate, soil rest, and serfs, like you, never stop moving. You chew a bit of stale barley bread and sling your tool over your shoulder, a heavy wooden hoe with a curved blade that's seen better centuries. Outside, the air is damp, promising rain but not yet delivering. You pass a group of women already singing as they walk, voices weaving together like a traveling loom. On the ridge, your neighbors are spread out like chess pieces. Some dig, some rake, some just stand there contemplating the meaning of mud. You take your place at the end of your strip and begin breaking soil. It's clay heavy, packed tight, with stubborn weeds that hiss at you through their roots. One pull, two pulls. Your back protests. Your arms join in. You try to strike a rhythm. Dig, swing, twist, breathe. It's almost like a dance. If dancing involved blisters and the constant threat of stepping on a mole, the work is slow, and your thoughts begin to wander. You think about what you'll plant. Barley, probably. Maybe some beans if the manner allows. Wheat is for the rich and religious. Lentils are reliable, but make your stomach sound like an angry kettle. Next to you, Osric is muttering to himself. He's been farming this strip for 20 years and claims he once saw a fairy pulling up onions by moonlight. Historians still debate whether tales like this reflect genuine belief, stress-induced hallucination, or just boredom with root vegetables. You ask him what he's planting. Hope, he says. Then he sneezes and throws a rock at a crow. By midday, your shoulders ache and your tunic is damp with sweat and soil. Someone's brought out a jug of small beer, a weak brew, barely alcoholic, just enough to hydrate without dying. You pass it around. It tastes like liquid bread and regrets, but it keeps you moving. Lunch is brief. Cold pottage eaten with your fingers, sitting on a turned-up spade. The ground beneath you is warm. The air thick with the scent of crushed weeds and damp wool. You watch clouds pass overhead, slow and soft, like overfed sheep. A small dog runs past, chasing something invisible, possibly its own sense of self-worth. You resume work with a sigh. The sun dips lower. Sweat drips from your nose into the earth. You hum a tune under your breath, one of the harvest songs from the last festival, the one where someone tried to juggle cabbages and accidentally started a food fight. As you dig, your blade hits something hard. You pause, kneel, brush away the dirt. It's not a rock. It's wood, dark, smooth, buried deep. A box, maybe? You dig around it cautiously, half expecting it to contain treasure, a curse, or a very angry hedgehog. It's none of the above. It's part of an old cart axle, likely abandoned decades ago. Still, you pocket a few nails. They're expensive, and consider the discovery a moral victory. Your hands are blistered, fingers cramped. The hose handle has formed a perfect groove in your palm, like your skin is trying to remember its shape. You keep going. Near sunset, the bailiff rides by on horseback, tallying who worked which field and for how long. You straighten your back, trying to look productive. He doesn't stop, but you hear the scratch of quill against parchment. Soon, the shadows stretch long across the furrows, and the work slows. The ridge looks less like a hill and more like a battlefield, where the only enemy was grass. You and Osric walk back together, tools slung, silence easy between you. The village comes into view, smoke rising from chimneys, chickens pecking at shadows. You pass the priest, who blesses your hoe absent-mindedly, then asks if you've seen his cat. Dinner is thin tonight. A broth with turnip and onion, soaked up with dark bread. Your arms are too tired to lift a second bowl, even if you wanted one. Someone plays a small pipe near the fire. The tune drifts through the cottage, soft and slow. You sit with your back to the wall, staring at your hands. Earth under every nail, blisters blooming like early spring buds. You can barely close your fingers, but there's something oddly satisfying about it. Like you've earned your sleep. Your cousin tries to impress the family with a riddle about 3 monks and a millstone. It makes less sense the longer it goes on. Eventually, someone throws a bean at him. You curl up in your bed of straw, scratchy blanket pulled over your chest. Outside, the wind picks up. The sound of owls echoes across the rooftops. The stars peek through the smoke-hazed sky, ancient and indifferent. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you imagine that ridge, perfectly planted, free of weeds, bursting with green in spring. A small hope, like Osric said, a hope with very sore shoulders. The rooster, ever the uninvited alarm clock, crows directly into your soul. You wake up unsure whether it's morning or just the prelude to a prank by some paltry deity. You sit up, joints complaining, straw sticking to your tunic like you spent the night inside a hay bale. There's no time to ease into the day, because today, my friend, is washing day. Now, don't picture laundry as some peaceful, sudsy ritual with lavender-scented soap and a catchy jingle playing in the background. This is the 13th century. There are no washing machines. There is only cold water, hard soap, and the iron will of whoever pulls laundry duty. Today, that iron will is you. You gather the week's clothing, tunics, hose, aprons, a few mystery rags no one claims, and dump them into a large wooden washtub. It smells like a medieval locker room in there. A mix of sweat, wool, and whatever lived on your cousin's shirt before it calcified. The soap is homemade lye. It's strong, caustic, and smells vaguely like judgment. You stir it into a bucket of boiled water with the same cautious optimism you'd use to approach an unfamiliar goat. To reach the village washing site, you carry the load down to the river. The path is muddy, slick with recent rain, and every few steps, you feel like you're reenacting the Battle of Hastings with your feet. Other villagers are already there, kneeling on smooth stones, slapping garments against wooden paddles with a ferocity that suggests unresolved personal drama. You kneel next to your neighbor Marga, who greets you with a sigh and a whisper. The soap's angry today. You nod solemnly. The soap is always angry. You dunk the first tunic into the frigid water. It instantly weighs 3 times as much and smells 10 times worse. Scrubbing begins. You work the lye into the fabric with a rough bristled brush, scrubbing in circles until your arms ache and your fingers go numb. Medieval washing isn't just about cleaning. It's a test of character. You knead, rinse, beat, rinse again. If it's still stained, You hang it near the smokehouse for a few days and pretend it's a new color. Marga tells you gossip while you work. The Reeves wife was seen buying extra candles. Scandalous. A local boy swears he saw a badger steal a pie. And someone claims to have invented a faster drying method that involves spinning clothes on a stick and praying. Meanwhile, your own hose is not cooperating. It clings to its filth like a knight to his sword. You begin to suspect that medieval dirt has agency. As the sun rises, the river sparkles, and your clothes finally start to resemble their original colors, or at least a paler version of the grime they used to be. You wring them out one by one, hands red from cold and soap, then lay them on hedges and low branches to dry. The air smells of wet wool and false hope. Somewhere nearby, a baby wails. A goose honks aggressively at a young boy with a stick. A woman trips and nearly flings a petticoat into the river, saved at the last second by an elderly man who catches it with a pitchfork and declares, "The Lord works in mysterious ways." Your favorite moment of washing day comes next. The sit-in. All the villagers rest on overturned buckets or flat stones, sipping warm ale or broth while the clothes dry in the breeze. The chatter slows. The sunlight is gentle. There's a certain camaraderie in communal misery. Marga pulls out a small needle and begins mending a torn hem. You attempt the same, but your needlework looks like it was done by a sleep-deprived squirrel. Still, it passes inspection from a distance of 5 feet or more. Historians still argue whether medieval laundry was a weekly, bi-weekly, or, when your tunic can stand up on its own, event. In practice, it likely varied by household, weather, and the presence of guests. You're glad it's over for now. Back home, you string a clothesline between 2 wooden posts and hang the last few damp garments in the sun. There's something deeply satisfying about seeing them flutter, clean, if slightly uneven, like flags from a very unfashionable kingdom. Inside, the cottage smells fresher already. The hearth crackles. Your youngest cousin, shrilled by the new lack of odor in the linens, wraps himself in a drying tunic and declares himself the Duke of Clean. You let him keep the title. He's earned it. That evening, you slip into a dry, sun-warmed tunic. It's scratchy, but not grimy. A rare luxury. Dinner is a lentil stew, thick and earthy, with a side of wild greens someone foraged near the abbey. No one mentions the possibility of sheep having wandered through the same patch. Everyone just eats faster. By the fire, you reflect on the simple magic of clean clothes. There's pride in this kind of work. Not glamorous, but vital. You're not a knight, or a merchant, or even the village bard who sings off key about geese. But tonight, you're victorious in your own quiet way. You fall asleep to the sound of rain, starting again outside, gentle and steady. Your body aches, but your clothes are clean. Your conscience clearer, and your dreams just a little lighter. You wake to the damp smell of your freshly washed tunic drying by the hearth, and a sharp knock at the door. Not the casual kind of knock that says, "Borrowing a cup of barley," but the formal, slightly annoyed kind that says you've been volunteered for something. You open the door to find a boy from the manor house, nose running, holding a bundle of tools and a scroll that's probably meant to look important. He doesn't speak, just hands you the bundle and walks off in silence, like some cryptic medieval postman. Great. You've been summoned for road repair duty. The road, of course, is less a road and more a deeply rutted trail where carts go to break axles and oxen go to question their life choices. The local lord expects a passable track between the village and his manor. And when something needs patching, guess who gets the honor? You stuff some bread in your satchel, sling the tools over your shoulder, and set off. Your cousin tags along for the first few minutes, but peels off the moment he hears you've been assigned the section near Whispering Hollow, a dip in the road known less for its acoustics and more for swallowing wheels whole. The trail is already busy when you arrive. Villagers are lined up with shovels, baskets, and a collective look of mild betrayal. There's Willa, the baker's niece, who somehow always ends up next to the stinkiest ditch, and old Bren, who insists the Romans built a better road here before breakfast. You get to work. The method is simple. Dig up the deepest ruts, lay branches or flat stones, then top it with gravel or packed earth. The technique is called corduroy road, not because it's soft or fashionable, but because it vaguely resembles corduroy pants. If pants were made of tree trunks and despair, the mud is thick today, sucking at your boots with a sound that's almost indecent. You stab your shovel into the muck, lift a heap, toss it aside, repeat. A cart rattles past, wheels shrieking like geese with performance anxiety. The driver gives you a nod that says, "Better you than me," and continues on his way, trailing dust and mild judgment. You pause to wipe your brow and take in the surroundings. The hedges are overgrown, tangled with bramble and bits of lost laundry from last year's storm. A squirrel stares at you like you've intruded on a business meeting. Birds sing overhead, cheerfully, unaware that you're ankle deep in what can only be described as swamp pudding. As you clear one particularly deep rut, you find something unexpected. An old iron horseshoe, bent and half buried. You show it to Bren, who squints and says, "Norman, maybe, or cursed. Either way, keep it in your left pocket." Historians still debate how often medieval rural infrastructure was maintained, or whether some roads simply evolved into mythological status, passed down from traveler to traveler as cautionary tales. Some even claim road repair was a form of corvée, unpaid labor demanded by the Lord. Today, you just call it Tuesday. Lunch break comes around. You sit on a dry patch of grass, eat a chunk of hard cheese, and share a joke about a friar, a plowman, and a leaky bucket. No one laughs, but not because it's bad, because chewing is louder than comedy. Then back to work. You patch, tamp, test with your heel. Repeat. The rhythm becomes a sort of trance. Your thoughts wander. You imagine being the one who finally builds a stone bridge across the river, or invents a kind of wooden shoe for carts that never breaks. You daydream of a world where roads are smooth, dry, and occasionally feature signs. Then you drop your shovel on your foot and remember, your world features none of those things. By late afternoon, the hollow is level, at least temporarily. You feel the worst of the bogey dips, added stones along the sides, and dragged a few thorny branches to discourage wandering livestock from doing their business mid-path. Small victories. Everyone admires the effort with the quiet pride of people who know the next rainstorm will undo most of it. You trudge home muddy, blistered, but oddly satisfied. Your cousin spots you from the doorway and offers a single-word greeting. Survived? You nod, barely. Inside, you strip off your muddy tunic and rinse your feet in a bowl of lukewarm water that turns dark instantly. Dinner is a meatless pie, mostly parsnip and onion, with a crust so dense it could stop a sword. You eat it all the same, because you've earned it. By the fire, someone strums a lute. Not well, but music is music. Your mother mends socks by candlelight. Your father tells a story about the time he fell into a ditch and came out with a wife. No one quite believes him, but everyone smiles anyway. Later, you lie in bed and think about that hollow, about all the footsteps and wheels that'll pass over your work tomorrow, about how no one will remember who fixed it, but everyone will complain if it breaks. It's thankless, dirty, and fleeting. And still, it matters. Outside, a breeze rustles the trees, a barn owl hoots, and somewhere on the road you patch today, a cart creaks its way home, just a little smoother. Morning mist curls along the eaves of your cottage, like a cat that's never quite welcome, but never quite leaves. You stretch, your back staging a protest on behalf of yesterday's roadwork, and hobble to the door. There's a note pinned to the door with a splinter. Help needed at manor. Bring hands and good humor. Signed simply, Cook. That's never a good sign. You shuffle to the manor house, which looms like a smug loaf of stone bread above the village. The kitchens are already in motion by the time you arrive. Smoke from multiple hearths, shouting across rooms. Someone waving a ladle like it's a weapon of war. And in the middle of it all, Cook. He is not named Cook. He has a name, probably, but everyone calls him Cook because that's safer. He sees you, nods once, and says, "The pigeons are late. Grab a turnip." And so your day in medieval food prep begins. You're peeling turnips at a table that's seen centuries of vegetable trauma. Your knife is blunt, your fingers cold, and the turnip seems resentful of being involved. Beside you, a scullery girl is grinding barley with a stone that probably predates the monastery. Everything smells like salt, onions, and wet dog. The manor's lord is hosting some minor noble for supper, which means the kitchen must produce something more impressive than the usual fare of pottage and stale bread. There are rumors of fish. There is confirmed cabbage. Today's menu includes roasted root vegetables, preserved herring in mustard sauce, a pie of questionable fillings, and a subtlety, a decorative dish that looks like a rabbit but is, in fact, eel. You're in charge of onions, many onions. You chop, weep, and repeat. Your eyes sting. Your hands reek. You begin to wonder if this is punishment for something you said about the Reeve last week. At one point, a boy bursts in shouting, "The chickens are loose," and chaos follows. You're handed a broom and told to retrieve them. The chase takes you through the herb garden, under the laundry line, and halfway into the latrine trench before you corral 3 hens and a very smug rooster. Back in the kitchen, cook hands you dough. "Shape it into a boar's head," he says without irony. You blink. He blinks back. You do your best. It ends up looking like a particularly upset loaf of bread. Cook sighs and reshapes it without comment. Historians still debate how accurate surviving medieval recipes really are. Most were copied centuries later or described in poetic riddles that leave out such minor details as quantities, temperatures, or ingredients. Still, the art of feasting was serious business for those who could afford it, and deadly serious for those preparing it. By midday, the kitchen smells of roast meat, cloves, and smoke. The pie is cooling on a windowsill like a fairy tale, and the eel is being painted with saffron to look like a duck. Your hands are stained with things you can't identify. Cook suddenly claps and declares, "Time for the trencher test." You line up with the other helpers, each holding a hunk of stale bread. Trenchers are the medieval equivalent of plates, thick slices of old bread, used to hold food. Cook walks down the line, poking each trencher to see if it'll hold gravy without collapsing. Yours passes, barely. You are rewarded with a nod. Later, the noble arrives. You do not see him. You hear about him. He's apparently wearing fur, despite it being August, and complained about the coarseness of the rye. The entire household holds its breath as he eats. The roasted turnips are declared passably tender. The mustard herring earns a raised eyebrow, possibly approval. The eel duck garners polite applause. Your onions? They go unmentioned. Perfect. In kitchen logic. After the feast, you help clean. Platters scraped, pots scrubbed, knives rinsed with vinegar. Everything put back exactly where it wasn't before. The kitchen slowly empties. You're allowed a small bowl of leftovers, mostly barley mash and a sliver of goose. It's the best thing you've eaten in a month. That night, back in your cottage, the air carries the scent of distant spices, nutmeg and clove from the manor. You wonder what it would be like to eat that way every day. But then again, could you ever taste saffron again without remembering the eel? You lie down on your straw mattress, hands sore but warm, and replay the day. Food, you realize, is the glue of the century. It brings people together. It silences nobles. It keeps the peasants from full-scale rebellion. For a while, anyway. Your cousin pokes his head in and whispers, "Did you save any onions?" You throw a turnip at him. The sun rises like a dim candle behind thick clouds. Typical weather for a day of wool duty. You wake to the soft, rhythmic clack of your mother spinning yarn in the corner and know immediately what's ahead. The house smells faintly of lanolin and singed wool. Your tunic still reeks of yesterday's onions, but no one seems to mind. You rub your eyes, scratch at a flea bite near your elbow, and prepare yourself for what might be the most repetitive day of your 13th century life. Wool processing. Take the fleece to Gilda, your father says, handing you a sack that could pass for a small sheep in disguise. You shuffle down the lane toward the weaver's cottage. Gilda is already up, of course, elbows deep in a tub of soaking fleece, humming something that sounds like a dirge, but is probably a love song. Her cottage smells like smoke, sheep, and stubborn independence. Late, she says, without looking up. She says this every time you arrive, regardless of the hour. You hand her the fleece. She eyes it like a jeweler, inspecting a rock for diamonds. Then the work begins. Step 1. Cleaning. The fleece is soaked in lye, or urine, depending on how unlucky you are, and stomped clean. You're assigned to the rinsing tub. The water is cold, the wool is greasy, and the odor is somewhere between wet dog sauna and barn after thunderstorm. You swish, squeeze, repeat, until the water turns a murky gray, and your fingers resemble raisins. Step 2. Drying. The wool is spread across racks or bushes, depending on how much Gilda is yelling. She doesn't trust birds, particularly crows, which she claims steal good wool for nest insulation. You're assigned watch duty with a stick and told to intimidate the local avian population. You swing lazily at a sparrow. It does not take you seriously. Step 3. Carding. You sit beside Gilda on a wobbly stool and begin carding, pulling 2 wooden paddles lined with metal teeth across the wool to straighten it into soft tufts. The rhythm is oddly soothing. Swish, drag, swish, drag. You start to hum without realizing it. "Not that tune," says Gilda. "That one brings mildew." Historians still argue whether medieval carding tools varied much by region. Some believe the English paddles were distinct from their continental counterparts, while others insist wool work was universally miserable, regardless of location. Step 4. Spinning. This is Gilda's domain. She threads the carded wool onto her spindle and spins it into thread like a magician. Her hands move with speed and precision, and the wheel hums softly. You try once and end up with a knot that resembles a sheep in distress. She politely takes the spindle back before it harms someone. Lunch is bread with clotted cream and dried apples. You sit in silence on a wooden bench, watching Gilda spin. She tells you about her uncle, who once wove cloth so fine it was mistaken for silk, until it unraveled in a rainstorm and left a bishop standing in his underthings. "True story," she says. More or less. After lunch, you help dye a bundle of yarn in a pot of onion skins and nettle. The resulting color is brown. Very brown. But Gilda smiles and calls it earth ochre. You nod like that means something. Step 5. Weaving. Her loom takes up half the cottage. A creaking, clacking monster of wood and tension. You are allowed to press the foot pedal while she threads the shuttle through the warp and weft. The fabric slowly takes shape. Rough, warm, practical. Gilda explains that most peasants wear undyed wool or browns and grays from local plants. Only the wealthy can afford vibrant hues like madder red or woad blue. And even then, the dyes can fade faster than a noble's attention span. She points to a finished bolt of fabric and says, "That's a week's work, and still won't cover your cousin's bottom." By evening, the light fades, and you help carry skeins of wool to dry in the loft. Your arms ache, your eyes itch, and you smell like you rolled through a field of sleepy goats. But the cloth is real, tangible, useful. You think of all the things this wool might become. A tunic for a child, a cloak for a shepherd, a blanket to warm a feverish elder. Or perhaps it will be sold at market, exchanged for salt or ale, or a good knife. On the way home, you pass other villagers, the blacksmith's daughter hauling coal, a brewer's apprentice delivering kegs by wheelbarrow, an old woman selling beeswax candles from a basket that seems older than she is. Everyone is doing something, making something. It's exhausting, yes, but it's a world knitted together by countless hands doing their part. Back at the cottage, you collapse on your bedding. Your mother fingers a newly spun thread and asks, "Gilda, teach you anything today?" You nod. "Never hum near damp wool." She smiles. A wise woman. You sleep deeply that night, wrapped in a rough wool blanket, dreaming of carded clouds and colorless rainbows. Somewhere, a crow lands on a drying rack and steals exactly one tuft of earth ochre wool. Because Gilda was right all along. You wake to the distinct sound of someone shouting about pigs. This is not, in itself, unusual. Pigs are the village's unofficial mascots, part nuisance, part emergency food source. But today, the shouting has a sharper edge, and when you crawl from your straw nest and peek outside, you see a cluster of people gathered at the edge of the green, near the Reeves' hut. A pig has gone rogue. It's standing in the middle of the path, chewing what might be someone's laundry, and snorting defiantly at any attempt to move it. It's large, pinkish, and possibly the most confident creature in the village. You sigh. This is going to be one of those days. The 13th century, it turns out, is a minefield of minor laws, feuds, fines, and mishaps, all enforced by local officials who range from reasonably competent to entirely indifferent. And when it comes to law and order, things get complicated fast. The pig incident is just the first act. By midday, you've watched 3 other villagers get hauled in front of the reeve. One for brewing ale without a license, one for letting his geese graze in the Lord's meadow, and one Your cousin, naturally, for inappropriate bell ringing after curfew. No one's entirely sure what that means, but it involved a cowbell, a barrel, and a misunderstanding about curdling milk. The reeve, wearing a tunic that hasn't been properly laundered since the last solar eclipse, reads from a cracked tablet of rules. By custom and common agreement, he says, the penalty for pig-led disorder is 2 pence, or 1 day assisting the Hayward with nettle clearing. The pig owner pays in onions. The reeve sighs and accepts. You learn quickly that medieval justice is a patchwork quilt of tradition, guesswork, and localized improvisation. There is no uniform code, no neat set of laws handed down from above. Each manor court has its own customs, and justice often comes down to who's watching and who you've annoyed recently. Historians still argue whether manor courts served more as tools of genuine justice or instruments of feudal control. In truth, it was probably both. Most minor disputes, fence placement, stolen firewood, wandering livestock, never made it further than the manor's jurisdiction. You spend the afternoon watching the tithing men deliver summonses. These are the men responsible for keeping 10 households in line. An idea called a tithing. It's essentially peer surveillance with peer pressure as the official enforcement method. A boy gets caught sneaking honey from the abbey's apiary. His father is fined. Another man is accused of insulting the dignity of a baker. This results in a public apology and, oddly, free bread for a week. You're not entirely convinced the baker didn't orchestrate this one. Then a hush falls over the green. The bailiff is coming, unlike the reeve, who's elected by the village and often resented for it. The bailiff is appointed by the Lord and paid to ensure order, taxes, and productivity. He wears a dark cloak, rides a shaggy horse, and carries a scroll of parchment like it contains thunder. He reads out 3 proclamations. The woodland will be closed for a common gathering this week. Deer spotted. All brewing must be registered and taxed. No further goat racing on feast days. That last one draws quiet groans. Goat racing is, admittedly, chaotic, but it's also tradition. Your cousin is already muttering about holding a secret race near the river. That evening, a minor case is heard under the manor's linden tree. A dispute over a boundary marker, a rock that apparently moved, or was moved, in the night. Both parties bring witnesses. One has a sheep that refused to cross the real border. The other cites sunlight angles and ancient moss. The steward listens patiently, then declares, the boundary shall be walked at sunrise the next day, and remarked with a cross of chalk. Until then, both parties are to share grazing rights and refrain from accusatory whistling. You're pulled into duty as a truth knower, someone who simply lives near the disputed area and is expected to nod wisely when asked vague questions like, was this always the turnip patch? You nod. Everyone nods. The rock stays. Later, your uncle explains that while the formal court is held 3 or 4 times a year, these little gatherings, the Halmote court, handle everything else. Petty theft, broken fences, public disputes, unlicensed dogs. Actual violence is rare, but if it occurs, things escalate quickly to shire courts or even church courts. depending on the nature of the offense. The church, of course, runs its own system entirely. Clergy accused of wrongdoing are tried by ecclesiastical law, which favors confession, penance, and long debates about intention. There's a rumor that a monk once got away with arson by proving he meant to illuminate the night with holy fire. That may be apocryphal, but it's very on brand. As night falls, you walk home past the alewife's cottage. She's been cited again for weak beer. A line of villagers waits with mugs anyway. No one actually expects the rules to stop anyone from drinking. Back in your cottage, your father tells you to remember 3 things. Never volunteer for jury duty if the dispute involves ducks. The miller always wins unless he sneezes during his oath. The reeve will forgive anything except goat theft. You nod solemnly and add your own lesson. Never stand between a pig and its snack. You drift off to sleep, wondering how anyone kept track of all the rules. You dream of scrolls unraveling endlessly, of pigs in court robes, and of the reeve chasing your cousin through a field of quarreling rocks. You wake up before the sun, thanks to a rooster who takes his duties far too seriously. Today, your father shakes you awake with one word: market. Your brain, still soft with sleep, takes a few seconds to catch up. Market day. That's right. One of the rare occasions when you leave the sleepy rhythms of the manor and head into the nearby market town. It's only about 4 miles away, but in 13th century terms, that's practically a mini expedition. Your family loads the cart with your week's contributions: cheese wrapped in leaves, a few skeins of wool, onions, and a small cage of extremely indignant chickens. Your mother wears her best kirtle, which looks much like the others, but has fewer mysterious stains. You've been told to brush your hair and to try not to talk too much. The road to town is slow and rutted, but it's full of life. Other villagers making the same journey, traders wheeling carts, a noble on horseback who gallops past and leaves a trail of confused ducks in his wake. The town comes into view like a crooked row of teeth, peaked roofs, smoke curling from chimneys, a faint smell of fish and manure on the wind. Welcome to commerce. At the town gates, a toll is paid. 3 turnips and a wedge of your mother's cheese. The guard sniffs the cheese suspiciously, but accepts. The market is chaos in all directions. Stalls crowd the square, voices rise in every dialect, and you are immediately surrounded by smells, both wonderful and unsettling. Roasting meat, honey cakes, tanned hides, horse sweat, perfumed soap, fish that should have been sold yesterday. You help your parents set up shop beside a potter who sneezes every few minutes and insists it's just the clay dust. On your other side is a woman selling love charms carved from rowan wood. She winks at you. You hide behind the onions. As the day stretches on, you trade goods, argue gently with customers, and people watch with the intensity of someone who rarely sees more than 50 faces in a day. You see a monk haggling over eels, a soldier offering a silver buckle for a comb, a young scribe writing names in charcoal for a few pence, A juggler dropping everything repeatedly. One boy claims to be selling dragon teeth, which are clearly just bits of sheep bone. His pitch is convincing though. You consider buying one for your cousin, just to see the look on his face. You learn quickly that money isn't always involved in a 13th century market. Barter is still king. Onions for ale, eggs for firewood, a pair of knitted mittens for a story. Yes, a story. The storyteller, a woman with a walking stick carved like a serpent, earns a loaf of bread for telling tales about a goose who solved a murder. You are transfixed. Historians still argue whether market days were primarily economic or social events. But to you, they feel like festivals of movement. A rare break from the predictable, full of sounds, smells, colors, and curiosities. You pass a stall selling imported spices, pepper, cumin, saffron, so expensive it's kept in a tiny locked box. The merchant tells you that the spices came along dangerous roads from the east through endless deserts and camel caravans. You nod like you understand. You mostly remember something about cinnamon coming from tree bark and being worth more than gold if you're lucky. One man hawks relics, a splinter from St. Peter's staff, a thread from the Virgin's veil, and, oddly, a feather from the angel Gabriel. Your father mutters that Gabriel probably owned a lot of birds, judging by how many feathers turn up each week. You're offered a meat pie that tastes suspiciously like turnip wrapped in crust. A group of traveling musicians plays a tune that sounds vaguely like three cats disagreeing over a bone. It's all part of the charm. Around midday, there's an announcement from the town crier, a bold man with a voice that could cut through fog. He reads the latest royal proclamation. All market weights and measures are to be checked and certified. The potter swears under his breath. The eelmonger pretends not to hear. This leads to the arrival of the ale taster, a very serious-looking man who goes from stall to stall, drinking samples and declaring them sufficient or offensive to God and palate. Your mother nervously watches him sip her ale. He nods once, solemnly, and moves on. She breathes again. You spend the afternoon exploring more booths. You see a woman selling ink made from oak galls, a man carving flutes from elder wood, a child offering songs for a penny. He sings like a hiccuping robin, a barber surgeon demonstrating tooth pulling on a pig's skull. Near the edge of the square, you spot something unusual. A man sitting quietly, selling nothing but stories. He has no sign, no cart, just a small wooden stool, and a voice like warm bread. People sit beside him, listen, and leave behind whatever they feel his words are worth. Coins, bread, a plum, a soft word. You sit too, and he tells a tale of a weaver who made a cloak of moonlight and mist, and was never seen again. You feel a little lighter when you stand to leave. As the sun begins to drop, the market changes tone. People pack up, bargains grow desperate, laughter mellows. Your family trades your last wheel of cheese for smoked fish and 2 bundles of firewood. Your father calls it a fair deal. You're not sure. The fish smells like secrets. On the way home, you pass carts full of unsold onions, cracked pottery, half-tipsy alewives, and one very smug-looking goose. wearing a ribbon. You suspect the goose did not pay for that ribbon. Your feet ache. Your stomach is full of questionable pastry. And your mind is buzzing with sights and voices. The market has emptied your sack and filled your head. You're not sure which weighs more. Back in the village, the quiet feels like cotton. The stars are out. The pig is asleep, for now. And the only sound is your mother's soft humming as she lays out the next day's bread to rise. You fall asleep with the taste of cinnamon in your mouth, probably imagined, and the memory of the storyteller's voice curling like smoke through your dreams. The rooster lets you sleep in today, or maybe it crowed and you were too tired to care. Either way, you open your eyes to a softer sort of morning, the kind with low clouds, quiet drizzle, and the kind of slow air that makes even the cows look like they're considering a nap. You stretch beneath your woolen blanket and yawn, so wide your jaw pops. Outside, the village moves gently. Your mother hums as she stirs something in a pot. Your father is sharpening a scythe, slowly, rhythmically. A neighbor waves from his doorway and promptly returns to sitting on a stump. Even the pig is still lounging, tail flicking with serene indifference. It's a good day to do nothing. Or, in medieval terms, nothing often just means everything slower. Your task this morning is communal, mending the hedges that line the path toward the fields. Hedges in the 13th century are not polite little garden boundaries. They're wild, thorny things, woven from hawthorn and blackthorn, alive and grumpy, and trained over years to hold their shape with a method called hedge laying. You try not to get too scratched. You fail. You work beside an older man named Elric, who swears the hedge spirits will curse you if you break too many branches at once. You nod solemnly and offer the hedge a brief apology, just in case. Elric tells you he once saw a hedge eat a chicken. You decide not to ask for details. Afterward, your arms are full of scratches. Your tunic smells like sap, and your fingernails are basically compost. You feel oddly accomplished. The midday meal is quiet. Pottage again, of course. Somewhere between stew and soup, made with peas, herbs, and last night's dreams. There's a bread, slightly too hard, perfect for dunking. You eat under the eaves while the rain picks up, tapping a gentle rhythm on the thatch. Your little sibling asks you if thunder is angels bowling. You say yes, but only if the angels are losing. The afternoon is devoted to spinning. Wool, that is. Not the kind of spinning that would impress a gymnastics coach, but the long, patient pulling of fibers into thread. You sit with the other women and a few patient men, twisting the spindle in your lap, fingers nimble, your mind wandering. Someone tells a story about a sheep who ran away to join a monastery. Someone else swears her spindle is haunted by the ghost of her mother-in-law. No one questions it. As your fingers twist the wool, your mind drifts to the coming seasons. Autumn will bring the harvest, a flurry of motion, carts groaning with grain, songs sung as the sides swing. Winter will mean fewer daylight hours, more firewood, thicker cloaks, and the long evenings of storytelling and shared stew. Historians still debate whether 13th century peasants had leisure time, or if that's a modern invention. What they often miss is the gray space, these soft pockets of time that aren't quite work and aren't quite rest. Spinning isn't just labor, it's also community, rhythm, and thought. Evening falls early today, draping the village in velvet clouds and damp grass. You help bring the geese into their pen. They do not appreciate your assistance. One honks directly into your soul. Inside, the fire crackles. Your family settles into their usual places. Father mending a boot. Mother darning a sleeve. Your sister whispering to a doll made of straw. You sip a warm drink, probably ale, possibly thin porridge. It's hard to tell in the dark. A neighbor stops by with news. Someone in the next village saw a comet. This causes a great deal of muttering. Comets mean everything and nothing. Omens, signs, warnings. You suggest it might just be the stars. Sneezing. No one laughs, but your mother hides a smile. As night deepens, your father tells a story from his youth, of when the river froze so solid, a cow walked across it, slipped, and slid halfway to the abbey. You're not sure if it's true, but it doesn't matter. It feels true. In the flicker of the firelight, you curl into your bedding, wool blanket wrapped around your shoulders, like a sleepy cocoon. Outside, the drizzle has turned to mist. The air is still, heavy with the smell of wet grass and wood smoke. Your last thoughts before sleep are hazy and warm. That hedges are alive, that markets are noisy miracles, that geese hold grudges, and that somehow, despite the lack of toothpaste, clocks, or indoor plumbing, you've survived a week in the 13th century. Just barely time for rest. And now, here you are again, back in your bed, safe and still, with the weight of another world gently receding from your mind. The village fades into the hush of memory, the scent of wood smoke drifting from the chimney, the faint clink of a spinning spindle, the distant mutter of a rain-soaked field. You made it through the mud, the markets, the manor courts, and the mysteries of mealtime, through goats with opinions, pigs with priorities, and neighbors with very strong thoughts about hedge spirits. The days were long, the rules bewildering, and the food occasionally edible. But somehow, you walked through it all. Now let it all go. Let the mud wash away from your feet. Let the scratchy wool fade to silk. Let the sky above your thatched roof stretch wide and warm with stars. Stars that shine on every century. Breathe. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands unclench. The echo of medieval life is still there, quiet and old and oddly comforting, like a half-remembered song or the creak of floorboards in an ancient house. Sleep is near now, the kind of sleep that comes with stories well told and lives half lived in borrowed dreams. Let the wind carry away the sound of the village rooster, the hum of a spindle, the whisper of geese. You're home, you're safe, you're warm, and you don't have to worry about curdled milk fines or rogue pigs anymore. Sleep well, traveler. You've earned it.